5 NFL teams that most likely could disappoint in 2025. Subscribe if you're new. Let's hop into it. Now, before we hop into my top 5, I do have 2 honorable mentions, and I also want to say this. If your team is on this list, I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to be a bad team in 2025. This is just to say they could potentially disappoint. Again, this is a most likely, not a guaranteed. And of course, if you do disagree, you can peacefully tell me in the comment section below. For my 2 honorable mentions, I have the Dallas Cowboys and the New England Patriots, kind of for opposite reasons. The Dallas Cowboys are a team that obviously every single year have super high expectations. I do think the Cowboys will take a step forward from last year, but I don't necessarily think they're going to be making a deep playoff run, which is what a lot of Cowboys fans are predicting for this upcoming season. If you're a Cowboys fan and you think they're going to win 11 games and maybe make a wild card berth, then you're probably pretty fine and safe. Then for the New England Patriots, there's a lot of buzz around this team potentially being playoff sleepers heading into the 2025 season. And while I do think that they could potentially be in those conversations during the season, I just think by the end of it, they might be a few games short of actually making the playoffs. I could be wrong on this one. I think they're a very talented team, but trusting a young quarterback like Drake May that's still developing with an overall roster that still needs another year of development, to me, it might be a little bit early to make that prediction. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and hop into my top 5. At number 5, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, if you guys know anything about me, you guys know that I do not like the Aaron Rodgers signing for Pittsburgh. I have been one of the many people that adamantly said that this was a terrible decision for not only Pittsburgh, but probably for Aaron Rodgers as well. Now, for Rodgers' side of things, hey man, go get your bag, go have fun for a season. Pittsburgh's a pretty cool place, so enjoy your time there. But ultimately, I don't think that this season's going to amount to anything for Pittsburgh. Now, frankly, I don't know if a lot of Pittsburgh fans actually believe in this team and believe this team is going to be title contenders or even playoff contenders, frankly. But if you are one of those Steelers fans that does think that Rodgers can get this team over the edge, I kind of think I have some bad news for you guys. Now, for the most part, this offseason, outside of the Rodgers signing, I actually kind of liked what they did in a lot of different ways. Moving off of George Pickens, who by most accounts was not the greatest locker room guy, at least in Pittsburgh. We'll see what he looks like in Dallas. And replacing him with DK Metcalf seemingly was a pretty well-decided thing to do. DK, in my opinion, is a better receiver than George Pickens. He's a little bit more well-rounded. And for the most part, I think he will fit into the culture a little bit better in Pittsburgh. With that said, he is paid a lot more than George Pickens, but Pickens is obviously due for a contract, I think, after this year. So it kind of worked out. And then you replace Najee Harris with, of course, Caleb Johnson, and Jalen Warren plays a bigger role this season. I kind of think that's a pretty solid wash right there. And frankly, let us be honest, I do think Rodgers is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I'm not sitting here saying that Rodgers is washed and trash and no longer anywhere close to the guy he used to be. I just don't think that at this stage of his career, with the roster that surrounds him in Pittsburgh, this is going to be a team that can seriously be competitive. And frankly, I do actually kind of worry about Rodgers, and not necessarily his health, but his ability to make it through the entire season. Number one, 100% healthy, but also, playing at his usual level. This is a Pittsburgh offense that frankly is a little bit top heavy. Outside of DK Metcalf, you don't really have anybody who you feel incredible about as that second or third option. Yes, you have Pat Freiermuth, who's a okay tight end. He definitely gets the job done. And of course, you have some solid running backs. And if you think Caleb Johnson will be good, then you feel pretty good about your running back room. Calvin Austin's there. You do have Roman Wilson. We'll see what he can do. Outside of that, you're relying on some veterans. You're relying on some older guys. And just frankly, let's just keep it a buck. That receiving room, if you were to rank it in the NFL, it's probably in the bottom half of the league. And then you look at the offensive line for Pittsburgh. And while I don't necessarily think this offensive line is horrific by no means, it's definitely not a unit that I feel confident in with a 40-plus-year-old quarterback that at this stage of his career is not the most mobile guy. You are going to rely on Troy Fautanu next year to hopefully be able to play either inside or tackle. We'll just have to wait and see how that ultimately pans out. I did not like what I saw from him in preseason, but of course, that's just a super small sample size to work with. You have to expect him to play a little bit better this upcoming year. And then Broderick Jones has really struggled throughout his young career so far. So other than that, I do think the interior is really solid. I just really worry about those 2 tackles, which arguably are the most important positions for keeping a quarterback upright. Yet again, I do think this offense will be a more run-heavy unit, with Rodgers maybe being able to take a bit of a back seat and work more in the RP quick play action game. But when it comes down to it, if this team has to do a 3rd and long, I just don't think they're going to be very successful. The defense will be solid. I think this team will be about a 9 to 11 win team and probably just inevitably be either a wild card loser or potentially not make the playoffs at all. I don't think they're going to make a deep playoff run. Moving to number 4, I have the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the thing about the 49ers is I think they're actually going to be really good in the regular season. And that's just really because of one main factor. And that's just the simple fact that their schedule is like one of the biggest cakewalks you'll ever see. We won't go through every single game here, but this schedule, just if you just take a quick pause to look at it, is unbelievably easy. Yes, you have the Rams twice, but outside of that, their next toughest opponent is like Houston and maybe Arizona. In general, I'm actually not worried about San Francisco when it comes to the regular season. I think they're going to be plenty fine in the regular season with that schedule and just with the overall openness of their division. My thing for this team is this is a team that is frankly wanting to make a deep playoff run. They want to return to form and get back to that title contention, when I don't really think they're that close to being in title contention right now. When you look at this offense, there is a shit ton of question marks all over this unit. Not necessarily with Brock Purdy, not of course with George Kittle, but your offensive line did not really get much better from last year. Trent Williams is just getting older. What does he look like at this stage? And of course, can he just stay healthy? Then the rest of your offensive line, can they step up their game? I kind of doubt that. It's a pretty older unit. Your receiving core, you have some good names, and if you rely on Ricky Pearsall to take a step forward, I think you feel okay about this unit, but Ayuk is coming off a major injury. Juwan Jennings is a good player. We'll see what we can get from Ricky Pearsall. Christian McCaffrey is coming off an Achilles injury, which I've heard mixed things about him in camp, but I feel okay about him, at least right now. We'll have to wait and see what he looks like in the season. And then defensively speaking, this is a very different unit from what we're used to with San Francisco. A whole bunch of new names. I still worry a lot about that defensive line because they were going to be relying on some really young players like an Alfred Collins, a CJ West, and of course, Micah Williams. And yes, you do have Nick Bosa. You made the move for Bryce Huff. We'll see what those guys can do. But I still really worry about that unit. You lose Drake Greenlaw, Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga. Yes, those guys were dealing with injuries, but you have to replace those guys. I like their young little secondary they have building, but there's some injuries there we have to worry about. And just in general, this is a team that is relying so heavily on younger talent to develop and make this team a title contender that frankly, I don't think they're going to be at that level this year. Now, long term, I actually do kind of like where San Francisco's at. I think they kind of shed off some of that loose skin this past offseason, getting rid of some bigger contracts and some older guys coming off injuries. So by no means do I think this was a productive offseason in terms of, they lost so much, but I think they did enough to keep this team competitive. And again, I don't worry about this team in the regular season. Instead, I just worry about this team when we get to playoff time because I don't frankly think this team is going to make a very deep playoff run. Let's go ahead and move over to number 3. And I would say of this list, this is probably my most risky pick of a team in this list just because they could be awesome next year. And that is the Detroit Lions. Now, when I say they're going to disappoint, I do not think the Detroit Lions are going to go like 8-9 or anything less than 10 wins. No, this team is still going to be very good. But given just how good this team was last year, even despite the fact with all the injuries, they still won, I think, like 15 games. I think this team has lost a lot this offseason that makes me honestly a rather bit scared about this Lions team and what their future holds. Now, it's not to say, again, that I think this team is going to be shitty. They could end up being title contenders by week 14. I would not be shocked with that. But again, you lose your OC, you lose your DC, you lose your starting center. You're trusting Aiden Hutchinson to come back from, a broken leg or something like that. And he is your go-to pass rusher because outside of him, not really a great edge rushing room. I just really worry about this team in those ways. And I hate to make this comparison. I did this in a past video. This Detroit Lions team in some ways reminds me of, I might be getting my year wrong, but the 2023 Eagles, where obviously 2022, they make it to a Super Bowl. They lose that Super Bowl. Both their OC and DC go to Indianapolis and Arizona, and they have to replace those guys with new guys from within. Those new guys step in there and they absolutely suck. And for the first half of the year, Philadelphia looks incredible, unbeatable, and then the back half they get figured out and everything that could have went wrong. And then they make the playoffs and lose in the first round. I have a little bit of some deja vu here with that Philadelphia team and this Detroit team, because that Philadelphia team was super talented and had a lot of great pieces, just like this Detroit Lions team is. and you lose your OC and DC, you have to replace those guys from pieces within, and I just kind of worry a little bit. Now again, this is a risky pick for a team to put in this video because there is always the chance this team comes out and just straight up dominates every single team, and I think frankly they will do that to some teams. But that starting center of theirs was a massive piece of this offense. He kept that offensive line together. He was so critical in just so many different aspects of the game. Losing him is an absolute bummer of the year, and I know they have some guys they feel confident in that can replace him, and I'm sure they'll make some moves maybe in the offseason next year or sometime during the trade deadline. We'll have to wait and see how that unit looks. I'm not like overly concerned about this Lions team, but given the fact that Detroit is coming into this year as potential title contenders, you lose your OC, you lose your DC, you lose your starting center, I do kind of worry a little bit about if they're actual title contenders this upcoming season. It also doesn't help this team that I didn't really love their draft either. So again, a risky team to put in this list, but you know, I like to take risks sometimes, so we'll see how this one pans out. Moving over to number 2, the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team that is just going through hell right now in the offseason with some of these holdouts and contract issues, and frankly, I do not blame the players one bit. This is 1000% a front office issue that needs to get handled with. Now, I have not done my due diligence to see like if the finer details have been figured out between Trey Hendrickson, which I believe contract negotiations have kind of restarted there, so we'll see what happens there. And of course, Shamar Stewart, we're still waiting to hear on that one. Both of those situations I do think will end up working out, and I do think Shamar and Trey will be back in Cincinnati uniforms this upcoming season. So that is the good news. I mean, at least I'm predicting it will be the good news. But even if those guys still do return, I still have a lot of issues with this Bengals roster. Now, let's get this out of the way. As long as you have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins healthy, your offense is going to be super productive and able to score with any roster out there. But I still do worry about this defense. Yes, you get a new defensive coordinator. We'll see if that gets the job done. I still think the unit is kind of scarce with talent outside of Trey Hendrickson. Like, yes, you're bringing Shamar Stewart. Still a lot of question marks with what he looks like in his rookie season. I think your secondary has some flaws too. Just a lot of question marks all over this defense. And yet again, I think this offense will probably be top 10, but can they replicate the same success they saw last year where this was probably the best offense in the NFL? I mean, let's not get it twisted. Cincinnati in like after week 5 or so had one of the most incredible offenses you'll ever see that was just scoring 30-40 points a game, and yet despite that they were still losing games. And I do worry that if this Cincinnati Bengals defense does not take a drastic step forward, and if this offense takes a slight step back from where they were last year, I do worry that this Bengals team is just not going to be very good. Now, I think it's all dependent on if you're going to be disappointed on this team, depending on what your overall thought process is on Cincy. Like, if you think Cincinnati are title contenders and can get back to that 2021 form where they were in the Super Bowl, then I kind of think I have bad news for you. Like, they're not going to get there. But if you are a realistic, fan of Cincinnati that thinks they'll win like 10 to 12 games next year and probably make the playoffs, I think that's somewhat fair. My big concern is that I don't know if this team is frankly going to make the playoffs at all. The AFC is super talented this year with a lot of really high-end talents. You look at the entire AFC West, they're very competitive within the own division of the Bengals. You have the Ravens, Bills are over there. Miami could also potentially, we'll see what they'll look like this year. You have the Patriots, you have the Houston Texans, the Colts. I mean, there's a lot of really talented teams, and I just kind of worry that Cincy might be the worst defense in this division, in this conference, frankly, and that could kind of hold them back. But we'll just have to wait and see. Again, it's kind of dependent on what your viewpoint is of Cincinnati. But let us go on and move over to number 1. It is unfortunately the Miami Dolphins. Now, I think Miami is a talented team, and I think their offense is going to be pretty good next year as long as you have their head coach, Mike McDaniel, you have that quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. If you can get Tyreek and Waddle to stay healthy, and if they can get some ground game stuff going with who they have in that backfield, the offense should be good. I also think they have a pretty underrated defensive line, especially off the edge. They have some legitimate juice on the outside. But what scares me about this team outside of some of their, more pros is that I still think their offensive line needs a lot of work. I still worry about the secondary. And frankly, I just kind of worry about what the upside of this team truly is. When you have Tua Tagovailoa as your quarterback, who by most accounts seemingly is a good quarterback in terms of being in the locker room, seems to be a good guy. And yes, he can dominate lower tier competition. Like, they can just drop 50, 40, 50, 70, they can drop a shit ton of points on those teams. But when they start to go up against the more talented teams within the AFC, when they get in those winter conditions, when they get to the playoffs, this is a Miami team that just straight up just flounders. Like, they do not play good at all. I think that's not just a problem with the overall roster, but I think that's a more big problem with Tua himself. I think Tua at this stage, with how much he's making, the expectation should be that he can lead this team to victories over high-level talent and high-level competition, but so far he has not proven the ability to do so. So you take all these cons into account: a poor secondary that's likely trading away Jalen Ramsey, by the way, a really poor offensive line, and an offense that I frankly don't think is going to be very good against high-end competition. I really do worry about this Miami Dolphins team. Now, their schedule may not be the hardest in the world, but maybe it is. I haven't checked their schedule, but I just think this team is probably going to be a team that wins 8 to 10 to 11 games. If they make the playoffs, it's yet again going to be another disappointing season. So if you think Miami's just going to be a 11-12 win team that makes the playoffs, makes a deep playoff run, you're sadly mistaken. But if you think they're going to be a wild card exit or just completely miss the playoffs, then you probably won't be disappointed too much. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or disagree with this video? And if you do disagree, let me know peacefully in the comment section below. And if you enjoy, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.